Darius Reed maneuvered his shopping cart through the grocery store's crowded aisles, his thoughts drifting to the simple comfort of his routine. Days off were a rare treat for him, a chance to shed the weight of his police uniform and badge, blending into the everyday hum of life. The store buzzed with soft chatter, the faint melody of overhead music weaving through the air, creating a soothing rhythm. He reached for a carton of milk, tossing it into his cart, when a harsh voice shattered the calm. "What do you think you're doing?" The words cut through the store's gentle murmur, sharp and accusatory. Darius paused, turning toward the front registers. There, a white man in a weathered leather jacket loomed over a young black cashier, his stance radiating hostility. Even from a distance, Darius could sense the man's aggression. The way he leaned in, towering over the teenager, squinting, he recognized the face Tom Leam, a fellow officer from the precinct. Tom's reputation was far from clean, his badge often a shield for his questionable behavior. "What did you say?" The cashier's voice trembled, barely audible, as he shrank under Tom's glare. "Don't play dumb," Tom sneered, his tone dripping with contempt. "I saw you slip something under the counter. Thought I wouldn't notice, huh?" The kid, barely old enough to hold the job, seemed to wilt. His face flushed as he stammered, I didn't take anything, sir." His eyes darted around, searching for someone, anyone, to step in. Darius's grip tightened on his cart's handle, his jaw clenching as he watched the scene unfold. He forced himself to stay put, hoping the situation might diffuse itself. But Tom's voice grew louder, drawing the attention of nearby shoppers. "You think I'm blind? I could have you arrested right now." The threat hung heavy, and the crowd's unease was palpable. Some shuffled awkwardly. Others looked away, as if ignoring the confrontation would make it disappear. The cashier's voice grew smaller, his protests barely a whisper. "I didn't steal anything. I swear." "Oh, so now you're calling me a liar?" Tom's voice was laced with mock outrage. "I'd love to see how you explain this in a holding cell. Think I'm bluffing." Shoppers now openly stared, some whispering, others exchanging nervous glances. Yet no one moved to intervene. Darius felt a familiar anger simmering in his chest, a frustration born of seeing this kind of behavior go unchallenged. The silence wasn't just discomfort, it was complicity. Releasing his cart, he stepped forward, hands loose at his sides, his expression calm but resolute. "Hey, everything okay here?" Darius asked, his voice steady, cutting through the tension. Tom spun around, sizing him up with a scowl. "This kid thinks he can get away with stealing," he said, jerking a thumb toward the cashier. "Not on my watch." Darius met Tom's gaze, unflinching. That's a serious accusation for someone just ringing up groceries. Tom's eyes narrowed, a flicker of recognition passing over his face, though it only deepened his scowl. "And you are just a customer, wondering why you're making a scene," Darius replied, his tone even. The cashier glanced at him, a spark of relief breaking through his anxious expression. "I didn't do anything, sir," the kid said, his voice shaking. "He just started yelling at me." Tom snorted. "Sure you didn't. You probably think I'm making this up." Darius held Tom's stare, his voice low but pointed. It's odd to throw around accusations like that without proof. In public, no less. That kind of thing can escalate fast. Tom's eyes flashed with indignation. "Escalate? This kid stole. Don't tell me you're falling for his act." Darius crossed his arms, letting the silence stretch. "If you're so sure, maybe we should call store management. Clear this up properly instead of turning it into a spectacle." Tom's jaw tightened, his bravado faltering. He gave Darius a quick once-over, searching for any sign of weakness. Finding none, he turned back to the cashier. "Lucky break. Kid, better watch yourself." With a final glare at Darius, he stormed toward the exit. The cashier exhaled shakily, his shoulders slumping. "Thank you," he said, his voice still unsteady. Darius shook his head, offering a reassuring nod. "No need to thank me. Just hold your ground, okay?" The kid managed a faint smile. "I will." As Darius watched Tom vanish into the parking lot, a quiet anger burned beneath his composed exterior. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. He lingered at the store's entrance, his eyes tracking Tom as he stomped across the lot, his face twisted with fury. The arrogance Tom had shown, the way he'd weaponized his authority against the young cashier, left a bitter taste in Darius's mouth. He knew he should let it go. It was his day off, and a confrontation in a parking lot wasn't how he'd envisioned his afternoon. But something propelled him forward, an unshakable need to challenge the man who thrived on intimidation. As he approached, Tom looked up, his irritation flaring. He let out a mocking laugh, shaking his head. "Oh, come on. Can't you take a hint? This is done. Go back to whatever you people do." Darius stopped a few feet away. His posture relaxed, but his eyes locked on Tom's. "I'd just like to know why you felt the need to go after that kid. From what I saw, he was just doing his job." Tom crossed his arms, his voice dripping with condescension. "What I do and how I do it is none of your business. You weren't there. You didn't see what I saw." Darius didn't waver. "I didn't see anything to justify what you did, either. Looked like you were trying to scare him into submission because you thought he'd just cave." "Maybe you missed something," Tom snapped, his tone sharpening. "That kid had sticky fingers. I know his type, lazy, disrespectful, always looking for a way to game the system." Darius's expression hardened. "Or maybe that's just how you see people. One glance, and you decided he was guilty. And when I stepped in, you didn't hesitate to lump me in with him." Tom stepped closer, a smirk twisting his lips. "Oh, I get it. You're here to protect one of your own. Think you're some kind of hero, swooping in to save that punk like he's worth your time." Darius felt a spark of anger, but kept his composure. "I'm here because what you did was wrong. You threw around accusations with no evidence. You threatened him, and you think that's okay just because of the badge you carry." Tom's smirk vanished, his eyes narrowing with contempt. "You have no idea who you're talking to. I've been in this game longer than you've been alive. I know what I saw. That kid was guilty." "Guilty of what?" Darius asked, his voice steady, "working a low-wage job, keeping his head down while you harassed him." Tom let out a harsh laugh. "You think you're better than me, don't you? Stepping in like some savior. All you're doing is showing your true colors. You don't care about what's right, you just want to stir up trouble." Darius's gaze didn't falter. "Why do you feel threatened just because someone called you out? Why do you need to throw your weight around to feel like you're in control?" Tom's face darkened, his fists clenching. "Watch your mouth, or you'll regret it." "Is that a threat?" Darius asked, his tone calm but unyielding. "It's a warning," Tom spat, stepping so close Darius could feel the heat of his rage. "People like you don't get it. You don't know what it's like to put yourself on the line every day, dealing with scum who'd rob you blind if you turned your back." Darius shook his head slowly. "I don't see anyone else here making assumptions. Tom, I don't see anyone else throwing around threats." Tom's face flushed, his voice rising. "You don't get to talk to me like that." "Or what?" Darius replied, his voice low and steady. "You'll try to push me around, too." A small crowd had gathered nearby, their murmurs growing louder as the tension thickened. Darius could feel the air crackling with anticipation, a volatile energy ready to erupt. Tom's eyes blazed with unchecked fury. "You think you're tough, huh? Standing here, trying to make me look like the bad guy." Darius held his ground, his voice unwavering. "I don't need to make you look like anything, Tom. You're doing that all on your own." That was the breaking point. Tom's face contorted with rage, and before Darius could react, Tom's fist swung forward, slamming into Darius's jaw. The force sent him staggering back, pain exploding through his face as he caught himself, the crowd gasping in shock. The sharp crack of the punch reverberated through the empty parking lot, a sound so jarring it silenced the murmurs of the gathered crowd. Darius Reed staggered, barely keeping his footing, his jaw pulsing with pain. His hands shot to his face, fingers brushing the tender spot where Tom's fist had landed. A faint smear of blood stained his fingertips as he wiped the corner of his mouth, but his eyes steady, unflinching, remained locked on his attacker. The sting lingered, sharp and hot, yet Darius stood taller, his resolve unbroken. The onlookers held their breath, their collective gasp hanging in the air like a frozen moment. Tom stood a few feet away, chest heaving, his face contorted with a mix of fury and smug triumph. His eyes gleamed with the satisfaction of someone who believed he'd just settled a score. To him, Darius was just another face in the crowd, someone he could put in their place. But Darius wasn't about to let this end so easily. The parking lot, bathed in the harsh glow of midday sun, had fallen eerily quiet. The crowd shoppers, passers-by, a few store employees watched with wide eyes, some in shock, others in disbelief. A few held up their phones, capturing the scene as it unfolded. Tom, oblivious to the growing scrutiny, seemed to revel in his moment of dominance. But Darius, his gaze still piercing, reached into his pocket. His fingers closed around the cool, familiar weight of his badge, and with a slow, deliberate motion, he pulled it out. The silver emblem caught the sunlight, glinting brightly as he held it aloft for all to see. "Darius Reed," he said, his voice low but laced with an authority that cut through the silence. "Baltimore PD." The smugness on Tom's face dissolved in an instant. His mouth fell open, his eyes widening as they darted to the badge. Shock flickered across his features, followed by a dawning realization, and then, unmistakably, fear. You're a cop," he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper, the bravado gone. Darius didn't flinch. His stare was cold, unyielding. "That's right. And you just assaulted an officer in front of all these witnesses." Tom's face drained of color. He glanced around, suddenly aware of the dozens of eyes on him, the phones recording his every move. The weight of his actions crashed down, and panic crept into his expression. He tried to mask it with a shaky laugh, his voice trembling as he spoke. "Come on, Reed, we're on the same side here. No need to blow this out of proportion." Darius's jaw tightened, his voice growing colder. "The only thing I see is a man who used his badge to bully someone because he thought he could get away with it. You didn't care if that cashier was innocent. You didn't care that you had no evidence. You just wanted to make him feel small because it made you feel powerful." Tom's face twisted with indignation, his voice rising in desperation. "You don't get it. Reed, I know his type. I've been dealing with them my whole career." "His type," Darius cut him off, his tone sharp with disgust. "All you saw was a young black man working a dead-end job, probably for minimum wage, and you decided he was guilty before he even opened his mouth. You thought you could intimidate him into submission. You thought you could intimidate me." Tom took a shaky step back, his face flushed with a mix of anger and humiliation. "Look, I'm sorry. All right, I didn't know you were a cop. I didn't mean for things to escalate." "Didn't know I was a cop," Darius echoed, his voice dripping with contempt. "You thought I was just some random black guy who'd stay quiet. That's all you saw." Tom's hands trembled, his eyes darting around for an escape. He forced a weak smile, his tone turning pleading. "Darius, come on, let's not do this here. We're both cops. We're supposed to have each other's backs. We're a team." Darius shook his head, his expression resolute. "A team doesn't mean covering for someone who abuses their power. A team doesn't mean standing by while you humiliate someone for no reason. That's not what I signed up for." Tom swallowed hard, his desperation palpable as he clung to the last threads of his composure. "Fine, I'll apologize to the kid. We can go back inside right now, make things right. Just let's keep this between us." Darius's gaze didn't waver. "An apology doesn't undo what you did. Tom, this isn't something I can ignore." He reached into his other pocket, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. The metallic glint made Tom recoil, his eyes widening in horror. "You can't be serious," Tom whispered, his voice cracking. "Darius, think about what you're doing. You're really going to arrest me in front of everyone." Darius stepped forward, his voice calm but filled with quiet authority. "Put your hands behind your back." For a moment, Tom looked like he might protest, but the weight of the situation and the crowd's watchful eyes seemed to crush his resolve. His shoulders slumped, and he turned slowly, his hands shaking as he placed them behind his back. Darius moved with calm precision, snapping the cuffs onto Tom's wrists. "Tom Lame, you're under arrest for assault in public misconduct," he said, his voice steady as he recited the Miranda rights. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The crowd murmured, some nodding in approval, others whispering in astonishment. Tom's face burned with humiliation as Darius guided him toward the edge of the parking lot, where a patrol car had pulled up, its lights flashing in response to the commotion. The two officers who stepped out froze, their eyes flicking between Darius's badge and the handcuffed man in disbelief. Officer Reed, one of them asked, his voice tinged with confusion. "What's going on here?" Darius kept his grip firm on Tom's arm. "This man assaulted me and was harassing a cashier inside the store. I'll be coming down to the station to file a report." The officers exchanged a quick glance before nodding. One stepped forward to take Tom, guiding him to the back of the patrol car. Tom struggled briefly, his voice rising in panic as he looked over his shoulder. "This is a mistake," he shouted, his voice breaking. "You can't do this. Darius, we're supposed to be on the same side." Darius met his gaze, unflinching. "Today, I'm on the side of what's right, and what you did back there, that was anything but right." The patrol car door slammed shut, the sound echoing across the lot like a final judgment. The crowd began to disperse, some offering nods of respect, others murmuring as they walked away. Darius took a deep breath, the weight of the moment settling over him. He knew this was only the beginning. There would be repercussions, questions, and likely tension at the station. But as he turned back toward the store, a quiet resolve steadied him. Whatever came next, he was ready. Later that afternoon, Darius arrived at the precinct, the morning's events still heavy on his mind. This wasn't his usual station, and though he'd never met Tom Lame before today, he knew the type officers who saw the world through a narrow lens, quick to judge and eager to assert their authority, often in ways that crossed ethical lines. Today, Tom's actions had gone too far for Darius to ignore. Captain Julia Hayes, the head of Darius's precinct, spotted him as soon as he walked in. Known for her sharp instincts and no-nonsense leadership, she waved him into her office with a look that suggested she'd already heard the news. Inside, she took her seat behind the desk, her expression a mix of curiosity and caution. "Reed," she began, folding her hands. "Word is, we've got an officer from the 8th Precinct cooling off in a holding cell, and you're the one who put him there." Darius nodded, choosing his words carefully. "Yes, Captain, I was off duty, grocery shopping, when I saw Officer Lame accusing a young cashier of theft. He was off duty too, but acting like he was untouchable. When I stepped in to calm things down, he threw a punch. I detained him." Captain Hayes leaned back, her eyes thoughtful. "So you'd never met Lame before today?" "No," Darius confirmed. "He didn't know me either. I'm guessing he thought I was just a bystander until he saw my badge." She nodded slowly, processing the details. "I can see how that might have caught him off guard. Lame's got a reputation over at the 8th. We've had complaints from the community about him, but nothing solid enough to act on. Assaulting a fellow officer, though that's a different story." Darius met her gaze, his voice steady. "It wasn't just a mistake. Captain, he thought he could get away with it. He thought no one would stop him. I couldn't let that slide." Hayes studied him for a moment, her expression a mix of approval and concern. "I'm not saying you're wrong, Reed, but an arrest like this, it's going to stir things up between our precincts. We've got officers who see things differently." "I understand, Captain," Darius replied, unwavering. "But if we don't hold each other accountable, we're setting the wrong example. Lame's behavior crossed a line I couldn't ignore." She gave a thoughtful nod before reaching for the phone, her face set with determination. "Then let's hear what he has to say. Send Officer Lame up to my office." She instructed the holding area, her voice calm but firm. Minutes later, Tom was escorted in, his expression a mix of resentment and embarrassment. He glanced warily between Darius and Captain Hayes, clearly aware of the gravity of his situation. "Officer Lame," Hayes said coolly, gesturing for him to sit, "Officer Reed has given his account. Now I'd like to hear yours. Tom shifted uncomfortably, trying to muster confidence. Captain, this is all blown out of proportion. The air in the precinct was thick with tension. The kind that clings to your skin and makes every step feel heavier. Darius Reed walked through the familiar halls, his boots echoing against the linoleum. But today, the weight of every glance and whisper followed him. He'd known there'd be consequences for what he'd done. Standing up to a fellow officer wasn't a small thing, but the reality of it hit harder than he'd imagined. It all started with a moment that could have been just another day on the job, but instead, it spiraled into something much bigger. It began when Darius stepped in to defuse a situation. A man Tom Layham, as he'd later learned, was roughing up a kid on the street, his voice loud and his grip tight. Darius didn't know Tom was an off-duty cop. To him, Tom was just a guy throwing his weight around, trying to intimidate. "Hey, ease up," Darius had said, his tone calm but firm, hoping to de-escalate. Tom didn't take kindly to it. His eyes flashed with defiance, and before Darius could blink, a fist was flying his way. The punch landed hard, and the situation went from tense to chaotic in an instant. Later, in Captain Emily Hayes' office, the fallout began to take shape. Tom sat across from Darius, his face flushed with a mix of anger and feigned regret. "I got heated, Captain," Tom admitted, his voice low, trying to sound contrite. "But we're a team here, This doesn't need to go any further." Captain Hayes, a woman with a reputation for fairness and a no-nonsense approach, leaned forward, her eyes piercing. "A team doesn't mean covering for each other when someone crosses a line. Tom, what you did out there assaulting another officer, harassing a civilian, that's not just a mistake. It's a violation of everything we stand for." Tom's jaw tightened, and he looked away, mumbling, "I thought I was doing the right thing." Captain Hayes sighed, her gaze shifting between the two men. "Tom, you're suspended, effective immediately, pending a full investigation. This isn't up for debate. Until we sort this out, you're off the force." The color drained from Tom's face, but he said nothing as he was escorted out. Captain Hayes turned to Darius, her expression a mix of approval and caution. "You did what you thought was right, Darius, and I respect that. But be careful. Not everyone in this precinct or beyond will see it that way." Darius nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle over him. "I understand, Captain, but if we don't hold ourselves accountable, who will?" A faint smile crossed her face. "That's what I hoped you'd say. Just watch your back. You're stirring things up, and not everyone likes a ripple in the water." The next morning, the precinct felt like a pressure cooker. As Darius walked in, he could sense the eyes on him, some curious, some hostile, all heavy with judgment. In the break room, the atmosphere was no better. Officers glanced his way, some muttering under their breath, others pretending he wasn't there. He grabbed his coffee, ignoring the stares, but before he could leave, Officer Paulson approached. A veteran cop with a grizzled demeanor and a reputation for speaking his mind. Paulson leaned against the counter, his arms crossed, sizing Darius up. "So, you're the one who dragged Tom Layham into this mess," Paulson said, his tone a blend of curiosity and challenge. Darius kept his voice steady. "Tom made his own choices. Paulson, I just did my job." Paulson's mouth twitched, almost a smirk. "His own choices. Huh. Some of us handle things our way without running to arrest a fellow cop over a misunderstanding." Misunderstanding. Darius's eyes narrowed. "He harassed a kid for no reason and threw a punch at me when I called him out. That's not a misunderstanding, it's abuse of power." Paulson scoffed, shaking his head. "Tom's from the 8th Precinct. He's been doing this job longer than you've been alive. Reed, he knows how to handle himself. Doesn't give him the right to bully people." Darius shot back, his voice firm but controlled. "We're here to protect the community, not act like we're above it." A few officers nearby paused their conversations, their eyes darting between the two men. One, Officer Blake, muttered, "Here we go." Under his breath, Paulson leaned in closer, his voice dropping. You think you're going to change the system by taking down one cop? You think that makes you a hero? Watch yourself, Reed. Not everyone's on your side. With that, Paulson walked out, leaving Darius standing in a room thick with tension. The other officers exchanged glances before drifting away, their expressions a mix of uncertainty and disapproval. Darius took a deep breath, steadying himself. He'd known this wouldn't be easy, but the reality of being ostracized by his own colleagues stung more than he'd expected. Later that day, Captain Hayes called him into her office again. Her face was serious, and Darius braced himself. Words spread fast. Darius, she said, her voice measured. Not just here, but over at the 8th Precinct. They're not happy about how this went down. Darius nodded, meeting her gaze. I figured there'd be pushback, Captain. She sighed, folding her hands on her desk. I don't disagree with your actions, but some officers think you overstepped, that you undermined one of their own. Tom's got connections, and they're questioning your judgment, saying you could have handled it differently. Darius's tone stayed even. Handled it how? By ignoring an assault, he left me no choice. Captain Hayes raised a hand, her expression weary. I get it, Darius, but this is bigger than just you and Tom. It's stirring up the department. There's going to be an internal review, not just of Tom, but of you too. They're looking at everything your approach, the arrest, whether you followed protocol. Darius's jaw tightened, but he kept his composure. I did it by the book. Captain. She nodded, her gaze steady. I believe you. But others might try to paint this as a personal vendetta. Be ready for that. He took a moment, letting the reality sink in. It wasn't just about doing the right thing anymore. It was about defending his actions against a system that didn't always welcome change. I'll be ready. Captain, he said, his voice resolute. She gave him a nod, a flicker of respect in her eyes. Good, you have my support, but be careful. People are watching. As Darius left her office, a new weight settled over him. The precinct had become a battleground, with lines drawn between those who saw his actions as betrayal and those who quietly supported him. Every conversation felt like a minefield, every glance loaded with unspoken judgment. But Darius wasn't one to back down. He'd started this for a reason, to uphold the values he believed in, and he was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. The tension only grew in the days that followed. Conversations hushed when Darius entered a room, and the divide among the officers became stark. Some admired his courage, whispering their support in private. Others saw him as a traitor, a cop who'd turned on his own. Captain Hayes, sensing the department was fracturing, knew something had to give. When she called Darius to a meeting in the conference room, he felt a knot in his stomach. This wasn't just another talk. Inside, the room was packed with officers, including a few from the 8th Precinct. The air was heavy, every sound amplified in the silence. At the head of the table stood Chief Alan Montgomery, a man whose 3 decades in the force had earned him respect and authority. His presence signaled that this matter had reached the highest levels. Darius took a seat near Captain Hayes, feeling her quiet support. Across from him sat Tom Lamb, his face a mask of resentment and unease. It was clear Tom hadn't expected things to escalate this far. Chief Montgomery cleared his throat, his gaze sweeping the room. We have a serious divide in this department, he began, his voice steady but commanding. One that threatens not just morale, but the integrity of this institution. The incident between Officers Reed and Lamb has brought issues to light that we cannot ignore. This isn't just about an arrest, it's about trust, accountability, and the responsibility we carry every day. He looked at Darius, then at Tom, his eyes narrowing. We're here to address what happened, but more than that, we're here to decide what kind of department we want to be. Officer Reed, you acted on principle, and I commend that, but your actions have sparked a rift. Officer Lamb, your conduct crossed a line, and that cannot be excused. This review will examine both of you, but it's also a chance for all of us to reflect on how we uphold our duty. As the chief spoke, Darius felt the weight of every eye in the room. He knew this was only the beginning. His decision to stand up to Tom had set off a chain reaction, exposing cracks in the system that many preferred to ignore. But as he sat there listening to the chief's words, he felt a quiet resolve. He'd done what was right, and no matter what came next, an investigation, backlash, or worse, he was ready to face it. The path ahead was uncertain, but Darius was determined to keep moving forward, carrying the weight of his convictions with every step. The air in my briefing room was thick with tension as Tom squirmed in his seat, his eyes darting around as if searching for an ally. Chief Montgomery, unyielding, fixed him with a piercing stare. "I've reviewed your reports," the chief began, his voice steady but edged with steel. "I've spoken with Captain Hayes and Officer Lamb's the commander at the 8th Precinct. I've also watched the footage from that day." His gaze sharpened, zeroing in on Tom. "Officer Lamb, you violated protocol. You accused a civilian without a shred of evidence, escalated a situation with unnecessary force, and assaulted a fellow officer." Tom's face burned crimson, his jaw tight, but he stayed silent, perhaps sensing that any protest would only dig his hole deeper. The chief shifted his attention to Darius, his expression softening just a fraction. "Officer Reed, you stepped in to defuse a volatile situation. You tried to keep things from spiraling out of control. I understand why you chose to arrest Officer Lamb, and I don't disagree with your intentions. But the fallout from this incident has fractured our team, and we need to address that fracture now." A heavy pause hung in the room as the chief let his words settle. "This department cannot function if our officers are at war with each other." He continued, his tone resolute. "We can't afford divisions based on precinct loyalty or personal grudges. Duty comes first." He exhaled, his voice softening slightly, but still carrying authority. "Here's what's going to happen. Officer Lamb, effective immediately, you're formally reprimanded. You'll undergo mandatory training and counseling. The complaints against you are under review, and any further missteps will lead to severe consequences. This is your chance to prove you can align with our values. Abuse of power will not be tolerated." Tom's eyes glinted with barely concealed resentment, but he gave a curt nod. Chief Montgomery turned to Darius, his face unreadable. "Officer Reed, I admire your integrity and your commitment to accountability, but you're part of a larger unit. When tensions flare, it doesn't just affect you or Lamb, it ripples through the entire department. I'm ordering you to attend mediation with Officer Lamb. This isn't a punishment, it's a step toward rebuilding trust." Darius inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of the room's eyes on him, some skeptical, others supportive. The chief wasn't finished. Raising his voice to address everyone, he said, "I'm calling on every officer here to uphold the principles we stand for: respect, integrity, fairness. This department is a family, and like any family, we've got issues to work through. I'm not asking you to agree with every decision, but I am asking you to commit to your duty without letting personal biases cloud your judgment." He leaned forward, locking eyes with Tom and Darius. "I expect you both to lead by example. Officer Lamb, it's time to change. Officer Reed, I trust you'll continue to hold yourself to the high standard you showed that day." Tom muttered something under his breath, but a sharp look from the chief silenced him. "This division ends today," Montgomery declared, his voice cutting through the room. "No more us versus them. No more precinct rivalries. We are one department, one team, and I expect every one of you to act like it." The room fell silent, the weight of his words pressing down on everyone. With a final unyielding glance, the chief stood, signaling the meeting's end. Officers filed out, some whispering, others lost in thought. Darius felt a mix of relief and lingering unease. He'd done what he believed was right, but the challenge of balancing accountability with unity was daunting. As he left the room, Captain Hayes fell into step beside him. "You held your ground well. Reed," she said quietly. "This wasn't easy, but it was necessary." Darius nodded, meeting her gaze. "I know, and I'm ready to see it through." Tom, lingering near the doorway, shot Darius a venomous glare before stalking off without a word. Darius knew the resentment wouldn't vanish overnight, not from Tom, and maybe not from others who sided with him, but with the chief's backing and the department finally confronting long-simmering issues, Darius felt a spark of hope. He was ready to face whatever lay ahead, knowing that standing up for justice was worth every obstacle. The day had been grueling, the precinct buzzing with tension after the chief's decision. Darius didn't expect harmony to return instantly, but there was a sense that the department might hold together. As dusk settled, he headed to the parking lot, eager to clear his mind on the drive home. The lot was quiet, the air cool, but quick footsteps behind him broke the stillness. Instinctively, Darius turned, his body tensing as Tom stormed toward him, his face twisted with fury. "You think you've won, don't you?" Tom spat, his voice low and seething. "Think you can humiliate me in front of everyone? Get the chief to slap me with a reprimand and just walk away like it's nothing." Darius kept his composure, his voice calm but firm. "This isn't about winning, Tom. It's about doing what's right. You crossed the line, and now you face the consequences." Tom let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "Consequences? You don't know the first thing about this job. I've been on this force longer than you, seen things you'll never understand. You're just some rookie trying to make a name for himself." "I'm not trying to prove anything," Darius replied steadily. "I'm here to make sure this department stands for justice and integrity. If that means holding people accountable, I'll do it." Tom's face flushed with rage, his fists clenching. "Accountable," he scoffed. "You think you're better than me because you made one arrest. You don't know what it takes to be a cop." Darius took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. "This isn't about being better, Tom. It's about doing the job right. You can't keep using your badge as a weapon." The anger in Tom's eyes turned dangerous. "You're an idealist living in a dream world. Reed, you think you can change things, but you'll learn the hard way this world doesn't work for people like you." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "You don't belong here. I'll make sure everyone sees that." Before Darius could respond, a sharp voice cut through the tension. "That's enough. Lamb." Both men turned to see Chief Montgomery standing at the edge of the lot, his expression cold as he approached. He'd clearly been watching, and his presence drained the defiance from Tom's stance. "Chief," Tom stammered, forcing a weak smile, "I was just talking to Reed, clearing up a misunderstanding." Montgomery's eyes narrowed, his tone icy. "We both know that's not what this was. I've seen enough. This behavior has no place in my department." Tom's face paled, his voice desperate. "Chief, you can't be serious. You're taking his side over mine. I've been with this department for years. I've earned my place." The chief's gaze was unrelenting. "And in those years, you've left a trail of complaints and questionable conduct that should have been addressed long ago. I gave you a chance to change. But instead, you're out here threatening a fellow officer. That's not leadership. That's not loyalty." Tom's mouth opened and closed, shock and desperation flashing in his eyes. "Chief, please, I didn't mean—" Montgomery cut him off, his voice firm. "It's too late for excuses. Lamb, I can't have someone on this force who abuses their position. You're done." Tom's face contorted with fury, his fists trembling as he glared between Darius and the chief. "You'll regret this," he hissed, his voice dripping with venom. "Both of you." "Enough!" Montgomery snapped, his voice booming with authority. "You're dismissed, effective immediately. Turn in your badge and gun by the end of the day." Tom stared, disbelief etched across his face. "You can't do this," he whispered. The chief didn't waver. "You're no longer an officer. Lamb, this isn't a discussion." After a tense, agonizing moment, Tom let out a defeated, bitter laugh. He shot Darius one last look of pure hatred before turning and storming off, his footsteps echoing into the night. As Tom vanished, Chief Montgomery turned to Darius, his expression softening. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that, Reed, but you did the right thing. You handled yourself well." Darius nodded, a mix of relief and respect settling over him. "Thank you, Chief. I know this wasn't easy." Montgomery gave a curt nod, his gaze steady. "No, it wasn't. But keeping people like Lamb on this force would be worse. You've got a tough road ahead, but you're on the right path." As the chief walked away, Darius stood alone in the quiet lot, the weight of the day settling over him. The path to justice was fraught with challenges, but he felt a renewed sense of purpose. Whatever came next, he was ready to face it, knowing that standing up for what was right was worth every battle. The weight of Chief Montgomery's words lingered in the air as he gave Darius a quick, firm pat on the shoulder, his eyes conveying respect before he turned and strode back toward the precinct. Darius stood there for a moment, watching the chief's silhouette fade against the evening light, the gravity of their conversation settling deep within him. Climbing into his car, he felt the flicker of something new, a spark of purpose, a resolve that burned brighter than ever before. This was just one step, one hard-won moment in a much larger battle for justice and accountability. But tonight, Darius knew he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The days after Tom Lamb's dismissal were charged with tension, like a storm brewing just beneath the surface. Chief Montgomery's swift decision had sent ripples through the department, stirring a cautious hope in some and unease in others. To bridge the gap, the precincts came together for a series of joint training sessions, designed to rebuild trust and foster unity. But the divide was still palpable. During drills that demanded teamwork, Darius could sense the unspoken friction, a quiet wall separating those who stood by his actions from those who harbored resentment. The silence between commands was heavy, laden with unspoken judgments. One afternoon, as the officers broke for lunch, Darius found himself seated across from Captain Hayes, a woman whose sharp insight and steady presence commanded respect. Their conversation turned to the deeper issues plaguing the department, and Darius felt the weight of the resentment he'd carried since arresting Lamb. He was tired of sidestepping the truth, weary of pretending the problem didn't exist. Setting down his fork, he met her gaze with unflinching determination. "Captain," he said, his voice steady but urgent, "these training exercises are a start, but they're not enough. Racism runs deep here, deeper than most want to admit. It shapes how we work, how we treat each other, and how the community sees us. We can't keep ignoring it. If we don't confront it head-on, nothing will change." Captain Hayes leaned back, her expression thoughtful, her eyes studying him with a mix of respect and curiosity. "You're right, Reed," she said after a moment, her voice measured but firm. "We've tiptoed around this for too long, hoping it would resolve itself. It won't." She paused, a spark of determination crossing her face. "If you're willing to take this to Chief Montgomery, I think he'd listen. Are you ready to push for it?" Darius didn't hesitate. "I'm ready," he said, his voice carrying the weight of years spent navigating a system that too often turned a blind eye. "It's time." That afternoon, Darius sat across from Chief Montgomery in his office, the air thick with the gravity of the moment. He spoke candidly, his frustration pouring out as he urged the department to tackle racial bias directly, not as a footnote in their training, but as a central focus. He spoke of the subtle slights, the unspoken assumptions, and the systemic issues that eroded trust within the department and beyond. Chief Montgomery listened intently, his face growing more serious with each word. When Darius finished, the chief leaned forward, his voice low but resolute. "I hear you, Reed," he said, his tone laced with respect. "You're right, this is an issue we've let fester for too long. Thank you for bringing it to me. It's time we do better." On the final day of the training sessions, Chief Montgomery gathered the officers in the training yard. The late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the group, Darius stood among his colleagues, his heart pounding with anticipation, wondering if the chief would act on their conversation. As the murmurs of the crowd faded, Chief Montgomery stepped forward, his presence commanding attention, his voice steady and unwavering. "We've spent these past few days working to rebuild trust," he began, his eyes sweeping over the sea of uniforms. "We've focused on the fundamentals of what it means to wear this badge. But today, I need to address something deeper, something that strikes at the heart of who we are and what we stand for. He paused, his gaze briefly meeting Darius's before continuing. Recent events have made it clear that this department, like many others, has allowed racial biases to linger unchecked. These biases affect how we treat each other and how we serve our communities. If we're going to move forward, we can't ignore this any longer. A hush fell over the crowd, the weight of his words sinking in. Officers shifted uncomfortably, some exchanging glances, others staring straight ahead. Chief Montgomery's voice grew firmer. Every one of you has a responsibility to confront your own biases, and I owe a debt of gratitude to one officer who brought this issue to my attention, Officer Reed. Darius felt a surge of gratitude as the chief acknowledged him, his chest tightening with a mix of pride and humility. He noticed a few officers turn to look at him, some with curiosity, others with a glimmer of respect in their eyes. The chief pressed on. Darius spoke to me about the racism that too often goes unaddressed in our work. He didn't hold back, and he made it clear that we owe it to ourselves and to the people we serve to do better. He's right. Racism has no place in this department, and starting today, we're taking action. The chief outlined a new initiative, ongoing training focused on recognizing and addressing racial prejudice, not as a one-off exercise, but as a fundamental shift in how the department operated. This isn't just about checking a box, he said, his voice resolute. This is about building a department where every person, officer or civilian, is treated with dignity and respect. A voice broke the silence, Officer Martinez from the 8th Precinct, his tone thoughtful but firm. Chief, thank you. I think a lot of us didn't realize how deep this runs. I appreciate Reed for stepping up. It's time we face this. Chief Montgomery nodded, his expression unwavering. You're right, Martinez. We can't serve our community if we're not willing to look at ourselves first. This department must embody the fairness and respect we demand of each other. His voice grew stronger, carrying a challenge to every officer present. I'm calling on all of you to join me in this commitment. Officer Reed took the first step, and now it's up to us to follow through. If you can't stand against bias against your fellow officers or the community, then you don't belong here. The crowd was silent, but Darius could feel the shift in the air, a tentative but growing sense of unity. A few officers nodded, others murmured in agreement, and Darius sensed a new understanding taking root. As the chief concluded with a firm nod, his words echoed with purpose. Today, we move forward together. We hold ourselves to a higher standard, and we ensure that every action reflects the values we stand for. This is our commitment to each other and to the people we serve. The officers erupted into applause, the sound reverberating across the yard. Darius felt a wave of validation wash over him, a pride that ran deeper than he'd ever known. As the crowd dispersed, officers approached him, offering handshakes, pats on the back, and quiet words of gratitude. Captain Hayes caught up to him, her smile warm and genuine. You did good, Reed, she said, her voice filled with admiration. You brought this to the forefront, and the chief's right, this change is long overdue. Darius nodded, a weight lifting from his shoulders. Thank you, Captain. I'm just glad we're finally facing it. As he walked to his car, the setting sun casting a golden glow over the precinct, Darius felt a profound sense of fulfillment. He was a Black police officer who had dared to speak truth to power, and in doing so, he had helped set his department and perhaps his community on a new path. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in a long time, he felt hope. Accountability and respect were no longer just ideals. They were promises he was determined to help keep.